I meant. So frequency is medicine, and it's kind of a broad subject and a misnomer because frequency is another way to say vibration, and everything that is manifest vibrates or has frequency. But what I thought I would start with, many years ago I read this, and at the time I read it, I recognized it as truth, but that's about as much as I could handle of it. And it was a lecture by a master teacher through a different source. But the teacher was asked, "What is life?" And the teacher's response was, "It's a movement and a rest." And in this context, he spoke a lot about meditation. We're active, we're out in the world, then, you meditate, you come in, you project out and in. But over the years, it just like a mind worm. It was always there, There's something more there. And as I was preparing for this lecture today, I realized that, that's what frequency is. It's a movement and a rest. It's a pulse. And specifically, what we're speaking of today as medicine is a pulse. It's a frequency, and in the healing work, it goes from 1 to 1,000 is what we work with. And it's electric microcurrent. And to distinguish what microcurrent is about 1,000th of the amps that your body uses to trigger a nerve response. So the threshold for a nerve response is way below what microcurrent is. And it's still a lot to learn about. It's being very widely studied, and it is kind of speculated to be more at the level that our cells communicate with each other. So you could anticipate that, our cells are always communicating with each other, and each tissue, each type of cell, as it differentiates, develops its own frequency. And so all the tissues have frequencies. And then more complex than that, all the functions have a frequency too. So it's, gets into the metaphysical realm. And for example, if one of the first frequencies that was experimented with was 40, the function of inflammation, meaning it reduces inflammation, and 396, which is the frequency that affects nerve tissue. So if you have 40 and 396 going, it's going to reduce the inflammation in your nerves and classically reduces pain. And so this was trial and error. And going back a little bit to the history of this, microcurrent was used along with electricity and magnetism extensively from 1990 to 1934. During that time, all the doctors, or most of the doctors, used it, experimented. Doctors had much more autonomy in how they practiced their medicine. That's the origin of the word practice, which now, most of it is very narrowly defined protocols that even if they're shown not to be effective, are still mandated. So the short history, in 1934, the AMA decided that electricity and magnetism, homeopathy, nutrition, herbs were not real science. That the only real science was drugs and surgery. So it wasn't a law, but they had the power to take away your license if you didn't conform. And then in 1954, the FDA officially banned electric devices. The devices we use today are classified as TENS machines because basically a TENS machine will short circuit the neural pathways and reduce pain while you're running the machine. So the history, there's two, if you will, kind of converging histories of the microcurrent as it's practiced today. In the 1970s, people started experimenting with microcurrent. And that microcurrent was non-specific. So you're going to learn that the difference is microcurrent, and what we're talking about, FSM, is frequency-specific microcurrent. So just microcurrent is used extensively if you ladies go to a skincare place. They put it on. It's proven to improve elasticity, improve collagen, and so you maybe go for a treatment for $400 or $500 for a skin treatment, but people don't want to pay that for FSM. Interesting, huh? The vanity of humanity. I love that term, vanity of humanity. Anyway, tells us about ourselves. Life can be self-revealing. And so what happened is Van Gilder was the name of the man. He was an osteopath. And in 1947, he bought a medical practice from a doctor that had retired, probably passed on. I don't know that part of it. But anyway, in the back room was a machine that had sat there from the 1920s, and it was a microcurrent machine, and underneath it, it had a sheet of paper that had all these microcurrents on it and protocols. And so he knew that Carol McMakin was interested in it. She'd played with it, and they had a machine, and that was the microcurrent machine. So her and her partner started to experiment with the frequencies that were listed there. And amazingly, they responded, and they were working on each other, and everything got better. It's like, wow, this really works. And then she started off, sharing it with other chiropractors. She was a chiropractor and wanted to see, and they're like, yeah, it works. This is pretty cool. So she started teaching it in 1997, 98, something like that, and really got it out because she recognized the value of it. And she also remembered the history of Royal Rife, which some of you will remember. He developed a frequency based on light, very successful at healing, and very tragic to his own personal life when he was shut down, confined in prison, and all his research and what he had done disappeared. And the reason that it disappeared, because he was a very private person. He didn't share his knowledge. He didn't publish his knowledge. So with this in mind, she saw the value and just founded an institution to start teaching. She goes, still does. She probably retire, she says, in about 4 years. But she goes all over the world teaching this medicine. And it's incorporated in some very prestigious clinics now. I went in January to the annual conference that they had, and the Sunday afternoon, he took the whole day. He's the director of the National Institute of Health's Alternative Medicine Department, and he's in collaboration with all these other practitioners and doctors, and they formed a international consortium. It's an acronym, HEAL, and the purpose of it is to explore ways to damp down the opioid epidemic. It's for pain. People in chronic pain are very desperate often. And so frequency-specific microcurrent is playing a big role in this. And one of the ways that they're exploring it, this will make sense to you, just kind of we're opening up and going a little deeper into the medicine. If you hurt yourself, immediately after that, you're sensitive to it. Your threshold of pain sensitivity is lower. What would, like that wouldn't even affect you. If you injure yourself, you do like that, it's, ow, that hurts, right? And so it's a response to protect the wound and allow it to heal. As it heals, you would hope that your body reprograms itself in a way that, the tissue and that response no longer exists. But that's not always the case. A lot of chronic pain happens after the healing's occurred, but you still have that lower sensitivity to pain. And some of that is in a spinal response, doesn't even get up to the brain. Some of it gets up to the brain. And so what they found is by running the frequencies of 40, which is for inflammation, and 10, which is the spinal cord, they can reset that, and they call it the stable state. What you want to do is try to get your body, within the context of the healing process, back to the stable state. That's just like if your body's, the analogy would be if you ever drank alcohol and felt yourself altered, you recognize when you're back to normal. And so you want your body to get back to normal. And sometimes it needs help. There's other things. They very frequently use nutrition with it, because one of the principles of microcurrent is it cannot affect tissue if there's no tissue there. So for a degenerative disease, usually people hope, but you would hope that you can hold the line. That as long as there's some tissue there, some tissues will regenerate, some won't. So you have a non-invasive electrotherapy that is not dependent on drugs. There are a lot of protocols. There was one protocol, and I got to look it up and I'll get it to you, with COVID, to remove the spike protein from the body. So you use the frequency with an aggressive herbal protocol. So we've covered a bunch of it here. So, and we'll go into detail about it, what it is now. We use what's called a two-channel system, okay? There's an A channel and a B channel. And the A channel, she's designated, it's arbitrary, for function. So inflammation, dissolving scar tissue, clearing toxins, and the function can be on an emotional level too, one that's used a lot, and we'll experiment it after the lecture. 970 has the emotional component. So and it's interesting because the components are and they found this independently, they're very much related to the Chinese function of the organ. So like if you have fear, dominating your consciousness, you can run 970, the emotional content, which I believe it's 35, which is the kidney. And that reduces fear. And kidney is, where you experience fear. Joy is the heart, 397 and 33. So it's very specific, the currents, and they're still experimenting, still exploring more, because theoretically every function, every tissue, even down to the cellular level, perhaps would have things. So that's an important distinction that we're coming back to, is to remember that it's specific for the tissue. To give you an example, let me take my coat off, if I may. When I took the first course that I took, can't do that, I've got a microphone. Well, okay, anyway, I can still do it. It'll look weirder. But she asked, has anybody been in a car accident? And if anybody knows how I used to drive, you can guess, yeah, I bet he has been. So I raised my hand, some reason she's like, yeah, you. And so, I went up there and she said, raise your arm up. So I raised my arm up. Thought I did pretty good, that's what my arm does. She says, okay, you've got a lot of scarring in your shoulder, don't you? I said, I don't think so, but let's see. So anyway, she worked on me for about an hour. And when she was done, it wasn't here anymore. It was all the way up here. And so she had done a lot of programs to dissolve the scar tissue, and to understand the scarring process is very important when you first have an injury, because it holds all the tissues together, it holds the joints together. But after the healing occurred, and they just, and the reason that, in the old days, if you had surgery, you laid in bed for 6 weeks. Now they want to get you up as quickly as they can. And that's because as you have motion, the scar tissue will dissolve and realign in line with the function of the muscles. And so, as far as we know, to specifically dissolve scar tissue, frequency-specific microcurrent is the only thing. So what's interesting is after I did that, she said, do it. So I went, and the arm's kind of wandering. And she says, she'd been doing this a while, very good. She says, that's because your brain doesn't remember, that motion. So she ran a frequency to increase vitality and secretions in the hindbrain, and I was able to do it perfectly. So and I saw her, this one lady had a degeneration in the palm of her hand, and it was like a dimple, and she worked on her for about an hour and a half, and it restored the thing. So it can be dramatic, and so I want to read you a little thing, because she often starts her lectures with one of her most famous patients. Here, on January 19, 2004, in a football game against the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver Terrell Owens fractured his fibula, the long thin bone on the lower leg, running parallel to the tibia. He ripped his deltoid ligament from the tibia, sprained his ankle, and shredded the intertuberous ligament, which is the largest ligament in the body and the strongest limb in the body. So during surgery, 2 days later, screws and plates were installed to hold his tibia and fibula together, and the deltoid muscle was put back in place. Unsurprisingly, his surgeon told him he would not be able to play in the Super Bowl, which was only 6 weeks away. At best, Owens would be ready to play the following season, but it was also possible he would never play again. Owens not only played in the Super Bowl, he made 9 receptions for an overall gain of 122 yards. Then he went on to play pro football for another 8 years. How was this possible? Answer, he called Carolyn McMakin, a chiropractor in Portland, Oregon, and told her he wanted to play in the Super Bowl. Within 3 hours of his fracture, she had him receiving frequency-specific microcurrent treatments. Within an hour of surgery, he started a 24-hour course of microcurrent stimulation. There was no swelling, no bruising, no pain from his injury or surgery. We ran frequencies to stop inflammation, to increase rates of healing, and to stop bleeding in the acute injuries, says McMakin, founder of New Heights Physical Therapy in Portland, Oregon. After surgery, he had 4 to 5 hours of frequency-specific microcurrent treatments daily. By day 3, he was running on a pool treadmill. By day 6, he was bearing weight on his leg and wearing sneakers. By week 2, he was doing proprioceptive retraining, which is balancing exercise. At 4 weeks, images showed the fracture and ligaments had healed. So, to go on, he actually spoke about her when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes not, because it's an alternative therapy and offers a lot of hope. Sometimes people, get disappointed with it because, their expectations, you don't know him, and I'm not giving the name, but I got a call from a man recently whose wife, it started out, she had had a traumatic experience and she had lost her ability to speak. And, because of the awareness we have in this group, you would understand that this is not acceptance. And so what he explained to me as we got more intimate in the conversation, his wife's brain had shrunk, so her paranoia and loss of voice was probably more to do with, a degenerative condition than a sudden traumatic experience. And so, his attitude, I need to save my wife. I need to save my wife. Well, we know we don't save anybody. We probably don't even save ourselves. So with that in mind, there are dramatic, heroic healings that can occur. And personally, just recently, last week, I worked with a lady that had degenerative disease. She was 83 years old. Her daughter had used frequency-specific microcurrent in Idaho, had a machine that she used, and she got my name through the network. And, I said, well, if there's degeneration, there's, I can't promise anything, but we can see. So we set up one appointment, and, we didn't make another one. She said, I'll check with you in a couple of days and let you know how I'm doing. Well, when I called her, she had been able to sleep through the night for the 2 days since the treatment for the first time in years. And so we have another appointment coming up. Hopefully it'll continue. So any quick questions real quick before we?
Yeah, what's the treatment look like?
We're going to show you.
Oh.
Yeah, after the explain, we're going to have a little demonstration. And to explain to you, this microcurrent, it doesn't have a high enough amperage to put you over the threshold of a nerve response, but you can recognize sometimes the response in your body. So I'm going to try a couple of frequencies. The first one you may feel a little, well, I won't say anything else, just wait for that. To finish up here, there are a couple of things, like I mentioned, it's being researched, and the working theory is that it works on the cells their cellular communication, that the cells themselves communicate in microcurrents. And so there's a field, it's within a field. If you think about it, everything's electric. We have a polarity, a positive polarity up here and a negative polarity, either under our feet or in our tailbone. And so in the embryonic stage, our body starts to organize around that. But how do we get the symmetry? Well, that's another thing they're working on. It's a gradient. And apparently there's a gradation of a substance that they call it gradient factor, different things, that it's more dense as you go right to left. Less dense to the left, more dense to the right. And so your symmetry organizes on that. And just for a fun fact, some of you will remember that whenever you're meditating, your spirit guides will come from your left. And in seances, Chipper will come into Clark's body from the left and then move into the right. And he does that because if he didn't, and an entity came in and didn't want to leave, then it would be really hard to get him out. So because Chipper's already in there, he can just push him out. And so, that's, something that keep in mind that, it's a lot to be discovered, but real quick, I'll go with you what they're looking for in moving forward with frequency-specific microcurrent. They're possibly modulating cellular signal pathways. They're looking at controlling bioelectric fields, targeted stimulation of tissues and organs applied to specific tissues or organs, potentially modulating their function or influencing their interactions with larger biological networks. Example, microstimulation of the brain has been explored for modifying neural networks and studying neurological disorders. So specifically in healing, that's what we're doing. We're targeting specific tissues and functioning. And it's also looking at enhancing modular reaction, frequency-specific microcurrent. A lot of physical therapists use it, and a lot of athletes use it for performance enhancement in legal ways. And it's also being used to investigate bioelectrical phenomena. So, one last question, anybody? Yeah.
How about cancer? How is it, what's the...
Interesting. Okay, that is a subject she avoids. If you ask Carolyn, what about cancer? We don't treat cancer. I mean, flat statement. It has cured cancer. We don't treat cancer. And her reason is for the FDA. If she put out there that, it was being used for cancer, they would shut her down. They've tried to. She went through a 2-week, she had all the lawyers, FDA lawyers actually practicing in private to coach her and everything, and they went after her. And she's very savvy because there's 2 companies that she's involved in. One is Frequency-Specific Microcurrent, which is a seminar and a teaching group, okay? And so she teaches, nobody can tell you not to teach something. And then there's a very separate company that makes the machines. And now you can get other machines too. I use hers because I know how to use them. They're very precise, very well made. They're, as she says, category class 5. Most of the other machines on the market would be class 3 or 4. So they're very precise, which is critical for the medicine. So it does, in fact, there's a forum that I'm in, and I put it out there, how about cancer? And a guy said, I'm not afraid to talk about it. So if you Google frequency-specific microcurrents and cancer treatments, there are some videos and apparently protocols for it. And I guess I should continue to give you an idea of a protocol that can be long. So it's not, usually you don't use just 2 frequencies. You would, like, if you had pain, in the shoulder, you would run 40 in all the tissues in the frame, the tendons, the connective tissue, the blood vessels, the bursa, and so they can be rather long. Then after the pain's reduced, you would run torn and broken, which stimulates the healing process, again, with all those tissues. Then you could run some of the auxiliary treatments, remove toxicity, if it's old or new, sometimes the frequency 284 is used for old injuries. And then you would go through the tissues again with 81 that stimulates secretion in the tissues. And then you would go with vitality. And the vitality has been shown to increase the ATP in the cells by 500 times, the base levels. And they've done research on that. So thank you for your attention, and we'll have a little demonstration afterward.